Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Game Over Vancouver. I am your host, Zach Clarke. Joining me, as he has a few times now this year, BCHL/PJHL color commentator Liam Higgs, to talk about a massive Canucks victory tonight. I mean, what an awesome game that was to watch for a team that has been struggling so hard on home ice this year. And there have been serious questions posed about this team's ability to keep up with other playoff teams. Tonight felt like a statement win that says, hey, we're still the Canucks. We're still as good as we were. Let's keep this ship rolling despite having some setbacks this season. Tonight might have been the best game the Canucks have played as we hit the 28 games played mark of the year.
Yeah, and I know me and you still had some concerns with still outshot again by the Florida Panthers, but it was really nice to see, obviously, the defending champions, Florida, up there at the top of the league. A really good test for Vancouver. Get JT Miller back. He had a really good game. I thought he looked a little bit rusty, really early on, but he got right back into form, 60% on the draw. I believe he had 2 points again tonight. JT Miller looked good. Beating the defending champs. Really good to see. Good test for the Canucks. I'll say this in terms of for the overall play in terms of Vancouver. We talked about it, but getting outshot 4 games in a row now, they've been outshot. It's okay in terms of being outshot against the Florida Panthers. I'll give them that. That's a little bit of give them a bit of a break against Florida. You don't mind getting outshot by them, but just a few games ago, getting outshot by, for example, the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's a game you win, but you'd like to see them come up on the shot totals there just a little bit. And I know we'll also get into the defensive core as once again tonight. Man, the names out there tonight for the Canucks and the defensive core were, yeah.
It's not a great game tonight for the Eric Brandstrom narrative that I keep trying to perpetuate because, of course, the Canucks shut out the defending Stanley Cup champions. Now, a huge part of that is Kevin Lankinen. I think that Lankinen sees Demko coming back as a challenge. He's like, no, Demko shouldn't be the starter. I'm Kevin Lankinen. I've been doing it all year. And he continues to play like one of the absolute best goaltenders in the entire league. With tonight's game, Kevin Lankinen now leads the NHL in shutouts. Now, that is tied. It's a 3-way tie, but leads the league in shutouts. Could you imagine coming into the year, you assign him to league min at training camp because no one else even wanted to consider him. Now, by this point, halfway through December, he'd be leading the league in shutouts. That has been one of the best signings for any team over the offseason, not just Vancouver. And Kaja May rightfully pointing out Max Sasson for the Calder. What a performance by Max Sasson.
How could we forget?
He looked pretty good in his last couple games, but he did kind of look like just any replacement fourth liner where, sure, you're good enough to keep up in the NHL, but are you really good enough to contribute? Well, tonight, he was good enough to contribute. Only 10 minutes of ice time. In fact, just under 10 minutes of ice time. 2 assists, including a really nice primary assist on the Danton Heinen goal, which was basically a Max Sasson goal. It went in off his skate. Just a hugely impressive performance for him and all of the Canucks on Pride Night. I mean, what better way to do a Pride Night postgame show than have 2 straight white guys taking over the postgame show. So all around, just a great night for the Canucks. And yeah, Max Sasson, going to be very hard to send him back to the AHL after tonight's game.
We talk about the defensive depth a lot, obviously, and the questions there. But I think one of the things that has been a positive all year for Vancouver is the depth of the forward group. And now you got guys like Max Sasson, who, like you said, it's hard to see a reason taking him out of the lineup right now. I mean, he was a +2. He won all of his faceoffs he got to take, had a couple of shots on goal. Obviously, I thought the setup to Carson Soucy was so underrated. It was really nice. He entered the zone so cleanly, buys a ton of space for Carson Soucy. Obviously, a little bit of a puck luck, and we'll talk a bit about that later. I think the Canucks, had some puck luck tonight for sure. But Max Sasson's, man, that was great for him. There was a couple of names. I actually wasn't sure. Ratu's out of the lineup, so I believe that's whose spot he was taking tonight, if I'm correct, right?
I believe so, although I think that he was slotting in on the wing, and then
Is it on the wing?
They moved Suter from wing to center, and then put Sasson in on the wing. So that's
but then what do you do with Ratu now? If you want to keep Max Sassons there, there's so many forwards here that's I don't know. I don't know.
It's a good problem to have, especially come playoff time. One thing that I think people forget is just how many players you will lose to injury during the playoffs. So having depth like this that can legitimately play, I think people need to not kind of consider them all as trade pieces. Because if you have, like, okay, this is awesome, we've got, 12 great forwards, and then no one else, come playoff time, you're going to find yourself with a terrible fourth line pretty quick. So honestly, I'm fine with keeping the likes of Ratu down in the AHL. Let him continue to practice his game. But he's exactly the kind of guy that could come up if needed with injuries. And we'll get to some more individual players, lots to talk about. But quickly, I do just have to say, of course, Game Over Vancouver, sponsored by Hyperdrive Hockey. Check out the flagship show of the Game Over Network, Hyperdrive Hockey. All things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries, whatever it is, and whatever it is. Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered with all your greatest hockey news with a steady dose of fun and fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. So, getting back to the Canucks game tonight, first game back for JT Miller. It wasn't just his first game back, though. Derek Forbort stepping into the lineup, and I'm actually going to start on Forbort. I thought that he was fantastic. And I think that, in my mind, Derek Forbort, his play tonight kind of made me realize just how bad Desharnais's been, because they're the same archetype of player, and yet Forbort did everything better tonight. Now, was he perfect? No, there was a couple fumbles. There was one in particular where I believe it was in the second period where he just completely flubs it at the blue line and they get a chance the other way. But still, overall, he was so much better as a similar kind of player. And it makes sense as to why Elliot Friedman halfway through tonight dropped a 32 Thoughts written pod saying that the Canucks are heavily trying to trade Vincent Desharnais.
And I think they're going to have to pay to get rid of him. I mean, we talked a bit about it, but man, Vincent Desharnais, I think, like you said, it kind of just exacerbates how bad he really has been. And it's kind of a thing that's like, there's no real 100% answer for this defensive depth. I mean, we talked about the graphic that the Vancouver Canucks posted before the game showing the lineup. That right side, Myers, Juleson, and Friedman down the right. That's a tough whole right side of the ice. That's not just one pair. I mean, there's multiple holes in this defensive core.
It's a bottom pairing guy and then 2 seventh defensemen.
Yeah. So, and I think the fact that Forbort was really good tonight is awesome. Obviously, like you said, there were still a few mistakes, but as a third pairing defenseman, I think he was really good. At the very least, definitely like what you want from your third pairing defenseman at the very least. But the rest of the decor, and I think this goes back to the problem of having, or the problem, if you will, of having so many forwards. I think you try and move one of these guys to answer this much needed defensive depth, because obviously having no Hronek makes it look a lot worse. But even with Hronek in there, I mean, you still, that whole right side, Myers, Juleson, Friedman tonight. The fact that we shut out the Panthers, I think that's something to be said.
No, for sure. And I think that you did notice Erik Brandstrom's lack of puck movement from the defense tonight. But I also will say, again, a tough night for the Brandstrom narrative, because the Canucks defense actually did overall look pretty good. Now, was I perfectly satisfied? No. But,
you're right.
And Sammy Baines saying what I was just about to say, which is that Susie has really stepped up lately. It might have taken 25 games for him to find a stride. But even aside from the fact that he had a goal tonight, I thought overall he looked very good, and honestly so did Myers. And that's the biggest thing for the Canucks defense, is that through the first 25 games of the year, you effectively didn't have a second pairing, because Susie and Myers were abysmal. I mean, they were barely passable by third pairing standards. And of course, they're who's expected to play the Canucks' second line, or second defensive line. And so if they're able to find the game that they found almost the entirety of last year, if they're able to replicate that moving forward, well, suddenly that's a lot less of a hole in the Canucks defense you have to fill. Because if, and of course this is a big if, but if all the Canucks defense is healthy and Susie and Myers are playing well, a defensive unit of something like Hughes and Hronek, Susie, Myers, and then all of a sudden you have a plethora of guys that can play in that third pairing. You've got
Brandstrom, Forbort.
Brandstrom, Forbort would be great. I mean, if Desharnais can pick up his game, Friedman's looked pretty good tonight. Now, I will say about both Friedman and Juleson, although I honestly think this goes for any seventh defenseman who winds their way up into the lineup, they all shoot the puck too much. They all do it in the offensive zone. They just get it and they release it, and the play is dead because none of them are that good shooters. I saw several plays die on both Juleson and Friedman's sticks tonight. However, those aren't guys you're bringing in for their offensive capabilities. Those are guys you bring in for their shutdown capabilities. And I thought both Juleson and Friedman played some pretty solid defense tonight.
I was going to say, I think that's the biggest thing that matters. Obviously, no one brought Carson Soucy in here to, oh my God, we need someone to score back there other than Quinn Hughes. That wasn't his plan. That wasn't his job. He needs to be solid defensively. He played almost 22 minutes tonight. I believe he was the third most played player on the team. Obviously, finishes plus. I think he had a couple of blocks and a hits in there as well. Derek Forbert had almost 20 minutes of ice time tonight. Also finishes. I believe he was actually neutral, but he wasn't a minus, which is a huge plus to see. I believe he was actually a +1. He was a +1. So it was really nice to see the defense step up. Like you said, it's really bad for me and you in particular because I'm a big voter for Brandstrom as well. I love Eric Brandstrom in terms of, especially with Hronek out. It's so noticeable when Quinn Hughes isn't on the ice, the lack of puck movement back there. Having Eric Brandstrom back there, I think is not like obviously not the key to winning games because obviously they won without him tonight against one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NHL. So it's not the best narrative for ours in particular for Eric Brandstrom, but like you said, in terms of the Canucks as a whole and going to the playoffs and winning in the playoffs, that's exactly what you need to see. You need Soucy and Myers to do their job defensively. Obviously, when Hronek comes back, hopefully he continues to do well with Hughes on that line in terms of putting up points, and then Hughes puts up all the points he needs because he's Quinn Hughes and he's amazing.
And he can do whatever he wants. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Casey Wren saying that Friedman was definitely getting under the Panthers' skin tonight. And that's what I've liked about Friedman's game in the past and why I've said he should be given a chance back on the Vancouver Canucks again as opposed to being down in Abbey. Was because I do think that Friedman is really good at drawing penalties. And that's something that he's been really good at in the past as well, as I wait for my camera to try and readjust here. This is not this year's stat, this is last year's stat, but last year when Mark Friedman spent most of the year on the Pittsburgh Penguins, he was the best player in the league at drawing penalties, bar none, not even close. Now, of course, he got less ice time, but per 60 minutes, he drew two penalties per 60 minutes of ice time that he was being given. The next highest in the league was one. Exactly half as good. So when he is able to stay in the lineup, if he's able to elevate his game to even just being a third pairing guy, the rate at which he puts the Canucks on the man advantage, or even just gets under any opposing team's skin, is huge. And honestly, considering that right now the Canucks' only guy whose MO is to do that is Kiefer Sherwood, I think the Canucks could use a bit of snarl on their back end. So I just hope Friedman can keep his defensive play up.
Yeah, and I hope he also doesn't start taking penalties, trying to draw penalties, obviously. Yeah, you gotta, there we go, fix your camera. It didn't like your face for some reason. It just wouldn't.
It's okay. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, apparently not. But I'll say this, in terms of the defensive core and all that, obviously we could talk about what they need to do or who they need to bring in or whatever till we're blue in the face. Something I want to talk about in terms of going to the playoffs and stuff like that. The depth looked great tonight. Obviously, the top six didn't light it up in terms of points. Miller had a point. I believe Pedersen and them had points as well. But you see the depth get him, or not
I'll
Pedersen.
Get to
sorry,
Pedersen in a second.
Yeah, we'll talk. But yeah, I got to talk about the depth. The depth was great, and that's what the Canucks need for a playoff run. Obviously, the top six for the last couple of years has been the conversation. Can we win with this core of Pedersen, Miller, Besser, guys like that? But seeing the depth step up has been fantastic. And against a team like Florida, when sometimes your top six isn't going to be able to get it done against the best teams in the NHL. You need goal scoring elsewhere. It was really nice to see guys like Max Sassons get on the board. It was kind of like one of those things for the Canucks tonight where like everything that could go right went right tonight. It kind of felt like that a little bit.
No, 100%. Things were really going well for the Canucks, and it was, for most of them. Let's get it out of the way. People, this is a Vancouver post-game show, therefore people will want to talk about Elias Pettersson. He was invisible tonight. Let's just be honest. He had 14 and a half minutes of ice time. 14. Just to clarify, that is about 3.5 more than Max Sasson, which really shows two things. Now, I'm going to look at the positive first. Positive way to look at it is that it means Rick Tocchet felt comfortable enough to run his depth lines as much as his top lines, which is great, and they rewarded him with fantastic play. The negative way to look at it is that Pettersson had 14 and a half minutes of ice time tonight, did not register a point or even a shot on goal. And again, it depends how you want to look at things.
I agree.
What kind of what lens you want to put over top of stats. And it kind of shows that stats don't tell the full story. Because that stat by itself would make you think, oh, the Canucks lost really badly. A 4-0 win, I'm going to take that however it comes. I don't care who's getting involved. But it continues my specific trend of every game that I personally watch, Pettersson's been invisible. So I'm hearing from other people he's been really good, but every game I personally have been able to watch, it's still just, I'm not seeing him.
No, obviously there's more to hockey than the stats, right? I think we talked about it during the game where like the last few games, Pettersson, even like the last few weeks or so, Pettersson stepped it up in terms of getting on the score sheet, but still the eye test. He's not as impactful out there as before. I mean, a couple of seasons ago, we're talking about a guy who you didn't really care who his line mates were because he was going to score no matter what. And now we're talking about, coming into this season, he needs better line mates. Pettersson's supposed to be the kind of talent that makes everyone else better. And he's not doing that right now. And obviously we have a little bit of talk in the chat about the cheap shot on Carson Soucy earlier. I think that goes back to having a little bit of snarl in the lineup is nice for the Canucks. Obviously going into the playoffs, you're going to want that snarl as well. But just to continue with Pettersson, I mean, it's been a long time now since we've seen Pettersson like from a few years ago, and it could be the wrist injury, it could be just the mentality of the lack of confidence. I don't know what it is, but it's something we can talk about forever, and it seems that we're going to have to, because I don't know when he's going to come out of this slump. He's obvious, and I can't even say it's a slump because like we said, he's getting on the score sheet, but in terms of what we're used to seeing and the level of, being a 110-point guy, I don't see that right now.
Well, so here's the thing. Last year, people were saying, oh, Pettersson should be elevating his line mates. He's not elevating his line mates. But you look at who his line mates were last year. Ilya Mikheyev and Sam Lafferty. Now, let's look at how they're doing this year. Last year, Sam Lafferty played 79 games and had 13 goals. Not great, but...
He's got one
honestly,
this year.
That's just not that good. This year, 22 games,
he's got one. Yeah, he's got one goal.
Ilya Mikheyev. Same thing. Last year, 11 goals in 70 games. Well, now he's played 30 games, 2 goals. So, undeniably, I think he was elevating his line mates last year, but this year is where I'm going to step in and say that he's really not, because he's not been the best player on his line. As you said, I almost wonder if,
I'll say this.
He looked good by comparison to his line mates. I just don't know what it is, but there has to be some points generation. And Kaja May saying he was good defensively. If you want someone who's good defensively, you pay them $1.5 million and you put them on your bottom. You put them on your bottom line center. I don't want to hear he's good defensively. He makes $11.6 million. Do you think Connor McDavid got paid what he did for being good defensively?
No, that's fair. I see what Kai's saying. Obviously, that 200-foot game does bring a little bit of value, but he played good defensively this game. He hasn't played good defensively all season. He's had a couple of really rough games defensively. And I'll also say this, in terms of his line mates, you talked about how this year he hasn't looked as good or hasn't been like the best on even his line. DeBrusk has, especially the last few weeks.
Unquestionably.
In terms of Money Puck, obviously I'm following Money Puck for these stats right now. But in terms of lines that have played at least 50 minutes together, for the expected goals percentage, DeBrusk, Miller, and Besser is our best line. But then the next best forward line at 40, the 40th best line in the NHL is Sherwood, Pettersson, and DeBrusk. So DeBrusk is on both of our best lines. So DeBrusk right now looks like the better player on that line. And I'll also say this, Pettersson since 2018 has had an average of at least 18 minutes of time on ice. So the fact that he only played 14 minutes of time on ice tonight, I think really says a lot. And so what? You played good defensively for 14 minutes. That's a huge step down from what you're used to playing in terms of time on the ice. And like you said, you're $11.5 million player. I love the defensive upside. I know last year I always kept trying to defend him with how good he was playing defensively. But like you said, at some point you get paid to score goals. You don't get paid to play defense.
If you are a first line center on a team, being good defensively is the cherry on top of the offensive cake. So if you ordered an $11.6 million cake and they just brought you a cherry, you're going to be disappointed. Even if the cherry is a nice addition, you're going to be disappointed.
A really good cherry.
Right now, we're missing the cake. Yeah, I don't care how good the cherry is. If I pay $11.6 million for a cake, get me some cake.
And he's been good defensively. And he's been good defensively. And he was even good defensively tonight, I believe he was as well. I don't think he was a minus tonight. But like you said, it could be it's supposed to be it's supposed to be the cherry on top. It's not supposed to be the whole cake, especially for a guy like Elias Pettersson.
But let's not be negative. Canucks won 4-0 tonight, so I'm going to just move on from Pettersson because honestly,
You had to start with you had to bring up Pettersson. Like,
you got to
obviously,
get it out
that's
of the
going
way.
to go
Like, we're not going to go through a show and not address it, especially since I will say how invisible he was. I do not have a note regarding Pettersson's play in my phone. Taking notes throughout this whole game, Pettersson was not mentioned once. Now, that does actually, I would say, mean he was pretty good defensively, because obviously if you're not
That's
good
exactly what that
defensively,
means.
you notice that. I have some notes saying so-and-so turned it over. So yes, pretty good defensively. But when your $11.6 million player is invisible offensively, it's not great. But again, 4-0 win. If the depth is playing that well, then you don't even need him to. So honestly, there is even a world where
let me get one more negative.
The matchups minutes.
Yeah, let me get one more negative out of the way. Let me get one more negative out of the way before we move on. I don't want to be too negative because I try not to be, but I have to have one more negative. We talked about how the depth has been playing well, but when it comes down to the playoff time against the best teams in the NHL, again like Florida, you need your top six to show up. You don't want your depth to be the guys to have to carry you. So like you said, it kind of depends on how you look at it. It was nice that the depth was able to get it done tonight, but against the best teams in the NHL, you kind of want your top six to find some success. So I'll leave it at that.
You can't rely on Max Sasson to bail you out every night.
Yeah, you can't rely on
Max. He'll be there most nights, but
yeah, you can't rely on Max Sassons to get 2 points a night and Derek Forbort to put one in the back of the net.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we take a look at some other individuals, so that way we can kind of run some positivity. We've already discussed Lankinen being really the best player in the entire league. Connor McDavid, move over. There's a new Finnish flash in town, Team Solani. Besser playing in his 500th game, he looked pretty good. And you know what? If we're gonna mention Besser, let's talk about the whole contract situation with Brock Besser. Because it's no secret that Brock Besser's contract expires this year, and that he is going to get paid. Absolutely paid. So, my question to you, Liam, what do the Canucks do with Brock Besser? Do they trade him at the deadline, or do they try and re-sign him?
Man, you love doing this to me when we get on here. You just throw it right. Just don't even tell me.
There's a bus coming. You're going right in front of that, buddy, every time.
I think it kind of depends what the Canucks want to do this season. And obviously, for the last few seasons, no matter how bad they are, they want to win. So if you want to win, I think you have to hold on to him. I think if you were going to look to try and shake up the roster, and if you thought you had to make some really big, drastic changes, I think he's one of the first guys you could look at moving. But at least in my opinion, I would hope that the organization feels the same way. I think they're pretty confident right now in what they have going. So I think you keep Besser.
So I agree, but just for this argument, I will play devil's advocate and just list some of the positives of not keeping Besser. Now, the OEL buyout steps up next year, so the Canucks lose cap space. So the cap space that you are gaining, because of course cap space is going up every year in the NHL right now, the cap space you gain from that is effectively nullified. So what I'm saying is the Canucks do not have the money right now to re-sign Besser. So it does mean you are going to be losing some players over the offseason. And right now, I mean, like, who do you want to lose that is actually making enough money to make a difference? I mean, obviously, you could point at a bunch of the bottom six guys. Oh, I don't mind losing them. Okay, you're getting back $800,000. Congratulations. And Besser, if you look at something like the Travis Konechny contract as a comparable, and even from the reports we've heard from the likes of Rick Dhaliwal and Elliot Friedman, Brock Besser is going to make at least $8 million AAV next year. And on top of that, that contract is going to go until, I believe he's 37. Already one of the absolute slowest players in the league. I don't think anyone's going to try and deny that. That's backed up by both the eye test and analytics. One of the slowest players in the league is only going to get slower over the duration of that contract. Now, I am going to go back to the point that I agree. I think the Canucks window is going to be realistically in the next few years, and Brock Besser isn't going to be falling off within the next few years anytime soon. However, if we assign Brock Besser long-term, I'm going to say I think the end of the Miller and Besser contracts might be some kind of dark times for the Canucks, because I just don't see those archetypes of players holding up until they're 37, which is how old they'd both be after their respective contracts finished. But at the same time...
Look at Antic Kopitar. They'll be just fine.
That's true, but I don't think Kopitar is the same kind of player.
I'm kidding, of course.
No, and Kings fan, gotta shout out Kopitar. Totally underrated. But the last thing that I'll say in defense of signing Brock Besser is just that if you lose Brock Besser, you have to replace that area in the lineup, and you're not doing that.
And it's
Jonathan
a big area.
Lekramaki is not going to be ready by that time. He might be in 2 years' time. But again, if you think that your window is now, you don't have the luxury of waiting for Jonathan Lekramaki to be ready. So I do think you have to re-sign Brock Besser. But honestly, I understand why there's pros and cons to both. And it would shock me, but it wouldn't blow me out of my mind to see Besser shipped off at the deadline, because there's going to be 100,000 teams or more looking after a winger that just recently scored 40 and backed it up with a really good playoff performance too.
My problem is, if they did do that, is obviously the forward core, it's really deep. I think you could plug in guys, you could move guys up the lineup, no problem, like Garland, but I don't know who replaces the goal scoring of Brock Besser, who's below him or not in the lineup right now. Obviously, JT Miller, obviously he can score goals like Brock Besser, but other than JT Miller, who's a better pure goal scorer than Besser? And even JT Miller, in terms of pure goal scoring, Besser is probably the best Canuck in terms of his release, his shot, just pure goal scoring. Obviously, I would say in terms of the release and the shot, Pettersson back in his day, I feel like I'm talking like some old man, like back in his day, he could really shoot the puck. But as of late, he hasn't obviously had the goal scoring touch that he once did. And right now, the best goal scorer, the best pure goal scorer is Brock Besser. So I don't know who would replace him.
Yeah, no, and that's completely fair enough. So I don't think the Canucks will be shipping off Brock Besser, but it is an interesting conundrum because, again, if you do re-sign him, you might lose some other guys, and the team could end up becoming weaker around them. So it just depends. That being said, if you do think Jonathan Lekramaki is going to be ready in 2 or 3 years' time, maximize that ELC by spending at least 1 year in Vancouver on the ELC, and then you've got a legit top 6 player on below $1 million, like Chicago with Bedard or San Jose with Celebrini. Take advantage of those ELCs, which Lekramaki's on right now, on the first year, I believe. So there are options, but I just don't think trading Besser makes sense.
And you're also banking on Lekramaki to be Brock Besser in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. You're banking on him panning out to the fullest of his ability, so you just don't want to go that. Sign him long-term, buy out later. Life is short. We're all going to die. Re-sign Brock Besser. Love the attitude from Kaja. Of course, I know Kaja, huge Besser fan.
Love Prince
I
Charming.
am too. I'd just be worried about the end of the deal is all. But at the same time, if you're worrying about the end of a deal when you're signing it, why bother signing it? I think that can be said for most long-term deals.
And especially if he's competitive for the majority of his deal, if this team's competitive for a majority of the deal, not every deal is going to be perfect every single year.
Honestly, the ones that I'm more intrigued about are specifically the one I'm most intrigued about. Let's go on to another contract talk. Connor Garland. 4 years on his contract. He was an overpaid monstrosity, nearly as bad as OEL. Then he got better, and then it's like, he's kind of starting to play up to his contract now. And now this year, one of the best contracts in the entire league, point per game legend. For
under $5 million a year.
Well, basically $5 million, but less.
It's 4.95. Yeah.
But however, his contract, I believe, is up this year, or is it the next?
Hold on, let me check.
It's up this year. So this is his final year.
This year, yeah.
So, or no, sorry. Next year is his final year. So the contract
signed it
until the end of next
2021.
year. But you'd need to start considering re-signing him next season. So it will be interesting to see what they do with him, because if Garland keeps playing the way that he's been playing, you're going to need to give him a raise too. And there's no way you're giving Brock $8 million and giving Connor Garland somewhere in the realm of 6 or 7. There's just no way.
I was gonna say in the realm of 6 or 7. Well, then I'm actually looking at the lineup right now. Who do you let walk? Who's the guy that you let walk? Who are the guys?
Well, that's exactly the thing. There's a lot of guys on long-term deals now. Obviously, Pettersson, Miller, DeBrusk, all long-term deals. Let's say Besser gets re-signed to a long-term deal. He's off the market. And then it's guys that just don't carry that much money. And not to mention, another guy who needs a contract at the end of this year, who has been an incredible asset to the team, Pius Suter. I don't think you can afford to lose Pius Suter.
Good.
One of the
you
most
talk about
being players in the league. The only other player that comes to my mind right now that I would say is Suter-esque is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And the Edmonton Oilers could not afford to lose Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I don't think we can afford to lose Pius Suter. But if you can't afford to lose Pius Suter, you can't afford to lose Brock Besser, you can't afford to lose a majority of these guys, Kevin Lankinen deal as well. Where are you getting this money from? And so it does raise some really difficult questions in terms of where you would get out. Kaya May saying Garland to the Bruins, also Lankinen. I don't like the thought of that. I don't want Garland to go to the Bruins. That's the last place I want him going.
It could kind of. I mean, he's scrappy. I could see him fitting in there too. That's a scary
Yeah,
thought.
Marchand
But
starts his
I'm just
broadcasting career. Garland takes over his spot.
yeah, takes over the rat role in
Yeah.
Boston. Yeah, I'm down for that. No, actually, I'm not down for that. What am I
Not
saying?
at all.
No, I'm just yeah. I'm looking at the contracts. I mean, Dakota Joshua, he's got three something mil average. I mean, 3.25 million average on Dakota Joshua. I don't know where the money comes from. Hoglander also is somewhere in the $3 million range as well, I
Yeah,
believe.
that kicks in next year.
Um,
You're right.
yeah, so there's a few guys who could walk, but I think the guys that walk, like you said, are going to be, you're going to have to replace them, and it's going to be actually harder than you'd expect. I think the only guy who right now I could see walking and realistically replacing, who carries a decent, I mean, doesn't even really carry a decent salary cap. It's only 1.8. But Teddy Bluger, I think you could replace him. He's been really good, but for 1.8, could you replace him or less? I don't know.
See, for me, I would say almost anyone else. I don't think you are replacing what Bluger brings for 1.8 because that's such a
Not for
cheap ticket.
1.8?
And also, just like you said, 1.8 doesn't free up enough money for these issues. So
For anyone,
it does make
yeah.
it look like you are going to have to get rid of some players that are currently looking like they'll be around long term. I look more at someone like Danton Heinen. Now, he makes 2.2, not that much of a far cry from 1.8, but hasn't been that good this year.
Bluger's been better. Yeah,
Bluger's been better, exactly. So now, I know he got a goal tonight. Let's be real. That was 99.9% Max Sasson. That went in, off the inside of his skate past Bobrovsky.
Yeah,
it does
counts his goal.
But I mean, you just look at some of these contracts. I mean, Nils Höglander, to me, it makes the most sense. He makes $3 million.
I was gonna say
Höglander. So
Höglander to me
let
makes.
me list the names that are up for a new contract either this year or the next. So this year, it's Brock Besser and Pius Suter. Next year, Connor Garland, Danton Heinen, Teddy Bluger, and Kiefer Sherwood. And not to mention, Lankinen will need a new one. And then in terms of defensemen, this year, Forbort, Brandstrom, Friedman, and Juleson, all of whom are pretty replaceable, let's be honest here. As much as I love Brandstrom, he's pretty replaceable.
They're all the defensemen are definitely all replaceable, but the next couple of forwards ones are big.
Defensemen are all not this year, but the next. My apologies.
Oh, sorry. Well, either way, they're all pretty replaceable. I don't see any of them taking such a big next step in the next year that they're all of a sudden not replaceable. But yeah, I think the forwards that are going to have to go are going to be pretty big pieces that you expect to be here long term. And I think you're right. In terms of my opinion, I think the one that makes the most sense is Nils Höglander, because not only does he carry probably the most relevant tag in terms of like money wise, up there, I think he's at 3.25 million or something like that.
3
on the dot. So he's 3 million, which is, it's more than 1.8. It's a decent amount of salary cap, even though I don't think even that's maybe not enough to deal with the problems coming up. But even then, Höglander, not only does he carry a decent price tag, but he's also looks like the man out of the forward group right now. Obviously, Talkett and him just haven't been able to find the chemistry. I don't know what it is, but Höglander right now just is the one that makes the most sense for me.
And even tonight, he ended up in the doghouse for a period of time after he failed to skate all the way to the red line for an icing, which, like, the second that happened, it was just, that's an error Talkett's going to rip you for.
And you kind of knew, you knew it was coming.
The moment it happened. So here's the thing with Darcy Higgs saying that cap space will go up. Okay, yes, it will. But you know what else goes up? The OEL buyout doubles this year.
Oh my God, I know that's gonna haunt forever.
$2.3 million next year. $4.6 million. You are paying OEL $5 million to not play for you. So that basically erases the cap going up. In fact, I think it fully erases the cap going up. Cap's going up by what? 1.82 million, and then the Canucks lose 2.3 in this. So it fully erases the cap going up. So that's the thing, is the Canucks don't have this kind of cap space. So what that really means is that it does make it really look like the Canucks window is kind of this year and next year. So that doubly means you really can't lose Brock Besser, but it also really raises questions about how well the Canucks are playing this year. Okay, tonight was an amazing win, but let's not pretend that there wasn't still some red flags, and obviously a ton of red flags before this. I still would like to see just one time the Canucks hit, I know this sounds unrealistic, 30 shots in a hockey game. 30 shots on goal in a hockey game. What an incredible stat. Mind blown.
You want to talk about
Just real quick, Danton Heinen's junior hockey team managed 80 shots on goal tonight. So let's see his current hockey team get 30.
Yeah, they had a real good game tonight. Yeah, no, just talking about the shots on goal. You want to know who didn't contribute to the shots on goal? Speaking about how bad the shots on goal count was. No shots on goal from Pedersen. No shots on goal from Niels Hoglander. So there you go. There's another two guys not even creating offense, not getting any shots on goal. And I think that's what we actually talked about, me and you, in terms of like our biggest problem with that game. Thought the Canucks had some really nice puck luck, but getting under 20 shots again tonight is pretty tough.
Okay, I'm going to move us to the second period, and then let's discuss kind of how much of that game was luck. Because again, you really don't want to be the wet blanket on a great game. I'll move us on to the second, but there was some serious luck involved in a lot of these plays.
It wasn't all luck, but there was some.
No,
there was some.
Absolutely. Well, you know what they say, you got to be good to be lucky and lucky to be good. So we'll move us on to the second period, where, of course, second period, sponsored by our crowdfunding efforts here at Game Over Vancouver. Game Over Network is an independent production focused on community inclusion and quality people with quality broadcasts. If you're interested in supporting us further than just liking, subscribing, and watching, which we so much appreciate, thank you. We have crowdfunding options available in the description of this episode below. You'll find a link to our Patreon page and a page through LaRouche, which is similar to GoFundMe or Kickstarter, but for companies originating in Quebec. For LaRouche, we're aiming to raise $15,000, and if we hit that goal, we will gain access to government grants here in the government of Canada that will help us employ more people and add more content. So if you'd like to support us more than you already do, please consider that. And if you'd like any ideas for giveaways from these crowdfunding efforts, because we'll do certain giveaways and certain things once we hit levels of that goal, let us know in the comments or on Twitter, Instagram, or our Discord server, which is always a great place to join and talk about the game as it's going on. So definitely recommend you join our Discord server. So, looking back to the game tonight, what was luck and what was skill? I'm going to start it off with some luck here. Very first goal, Carson Soucy. What looks like an incredible snipe. From the replay, you can actually see was going straight into Bobrovsky's glove until it clipped the Florida defenseman's stick and went in. Okay, that's pretty lucky. Let's move on.
I got baited too, because I said to you, like, man, what a sick snipe, and you're like, yeah, look at it again. It was not a sick snipe at all.
In our group chat with our great friend Lachlan Irvin, who unfortunately was supposed to be on the show tonight, but had to rain check, incredibly sick. So let's hope that he recovers well soon. Yeah, I see you texted right away, Soucy with a snipe. But no, on the replay,
it was not a snipe.
Stick and goes in. So, okay, let's look at the next Canucks goal. Sasson, that's the one where he puts it right off Heinen and in. Now, honestly, I would say lucky for Heinen, skilled for Sasson. Max Sasson, great guy, great player, as we all know, but still a fair bit of luck to get the bounce off a skate past Bobrovsky.
The third goal for me is the bad one.
I was going to say, then let's get to the third goal. Brock Boeser completely misses on his chance. Fans his shot. It just so happens to go off the backboard right back to him. Bobrovsky, thinking the shot was going to be a shot instead of a fan, ends up looking behind him for the shot, not realizing it just trickled off the board, and Boeser taps it home again. So really, the only goal that I thought was 100% like, okay, Canucks just outskilled, no luck involved, this was great, was that fourth goal. But again, then that's on a power play, not 5-on-5. So again, you got to be lucky to be good and good to be lucky. I'm not calling that a fraudulent win by the Canucks in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just saying, as 4-0 wins against Stanley Cup champions go, it, could have still been better, and that shows how high our expectations are from last year.
Well, I think that's it, right? It's the expectations. We want this, obviously, Canucks fans, for a long time, we want to see this team go far and win, and you have to be able to beat teams like Florida convincingly to convince people that you deserve to be a cup contender. And I think tonight, like you said, there was definitely a little bit of puck luck involved, especially that third goal for me was definitely the luckiest one, if you will. Bobrovsky, obviously, it goes off behind the net. He expects it to come out this way. He goes to his other post. It comes out this way. He's not even looking. Wide open net for Boeser. But you still held them to 0 goals. Lankinen looked great. It wasn't like it was a shootout and Bobrovsky had a bad game and we just outscored the problem. No, we were opportunistic on offense. Yes, it might have been a little bit lucky, but like you said, have to be good to be lucky, lucky to be good. I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that no goals for the Panthers. So yes, the goal scoring was a little bit lucky, but still holding the Panthers to no goals. I believe they still had 27 shots on goal, so they still outshot us by quite a bit. Obviously, we only had 19. So So it was really nice to see them get held to 0, and I think that's really encouraging for Vancouver.
There were some other good signs as well. 56.1% on the face-off tonight, which is very good for a team that has
Miller
been
looked
up and down in the draw.
It is so and it's so nice having Miller back for that exact reason. Pedersen only 46% on the draw. Continuing with the Pedersen, sorry, I didn't want to, but again, he was bad in the draw. But Miller, right back to his usual self. I believe he was like 60% tonight in the draw. He was great. So that's nice to see. And also the power play. You get to score again on the power play. It's 24% now on the year, 10th in the NHL. You talked about wanting Friedman to draw more power plays. His power play has been really good. Let's see more power plays.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, JT Miller, first game back after an extended absence, first star of the night, was great on the faceoff, got involved defensively, 2 assists tonight. And I mean, yeah, again, you just don't want to keep up the Pedersen narrative, but it does say something that when Miller misses this much hockey and he comes back and he's already not just better, significantly better. It is just, Rick Tocchet had that thing in his scrum the other day where PD, all you guys ask about is PD, but seriously, just imagine if Connor McDavid was the same thing, 14 minutes of ice time with no shots on goal, no points, nothing, negative in the faceoff circle. There would be serious questions about that. And so I don't think it's unfair to want.
I don't think it's unfair.
Player, even though, JT Miller was looking great tonight. Quinn Hughes again. I mean, his edge work is just incredible. He is actually one of the best hockey players I have ever seen in my life, and I think that there should be more consideration for him for the heart in just how much he is the backbone of this team. If this team did not have Quinn Hughes, how sewered would they be? Just absolutely, completely dummied if this team does not have Quinn Hughes.
He might win a back-to-back Norris. I've obviously always been a huge Cale Makar guy. You know that. I've always been like, I don't know, Cale Makar a little bit better. But he might win another Norris this year. I think he's first and second in every scoring defensive metric that matters.
Yeah. No, he's just incredible. So I think it was absolutely the right decision for the Canucks to name him captain when they did. He's just been incredible for Vancouver, an utter leader on the ice as well. Never gives up on a play, and I mean, just the rate it's his skating for me. He just looks so effortless, shaking off opposing teams' defenders, that having him out there is such an X factor that other teams don't have. And that's games like tonight are what makes me excited to watch Canucks hockey. Okay, it's gonna be really stressful. They're not gonna necessarily make it look clean, but this is a team that when they are firing on all cylinders can beat any team in the league. Hands down. We know this. They have 2, not 1, 2 elite goaltenders. They have the best defenseman in the league. I will not argue on that. This year and last year, he's been the best defenseman in the league. And then on top of that, you have 2 centers, both of which, when they're on their game, can be top 20 forwards in this league. Now, that's why I stress when they're on their game, because they haven't both been on their game this year at the same time. But if the Canucks can get hot at the right time, I maintain that no matter what happens to this team in the regular season, I said this at the start of the year, and I'm going to continue this narrative. I think this is a team that is now built for the playoffs as opposed to the regular season. I don't care if this team has a worse regular season. I think this is going to be a really great postseason. The one thing I would like to see the Canucks do is shoot more. I didn't even realize they didn't even hit 20 shots tonight. I was saying, we should get 20 shots. Not even 20.
I know they've been outshot in the last 4 games. Let me make sure I'm right. But I believe it's been might have been all 4 games. I think out of the 3 of the last 4 games, they haven't even broken 20 shots. And they were even outshot 32-17 by Columbus in that 5-2 win where we beat Columbus 5-2. We were outshot 32-17. But I'm going to continue with some positives here. Only had 8 giveaways tonight. We talked about the possession that Quinn Hughes has. He's always in the top 10, top 5 for possession stats. He always has the puck on his stick. Like you said, his edge work at protecting the puck up at the blue line is so good. But only 8 giveaways tonight as a team, as a whole, which was phenomenal. We had 8 takeaways as well. So it was really nice to see them taking care of the puck, not giving it up to a team like Florida, who has been great on the road. Other than the Canucks, since last year, they're the best team on the road, I believe. I actually heard that stat on the broadcast, so shout out to the Vancouver Canucks broadcast there. But yeah, so the second best team on the road other than the Vancouver Canucks, and we shut them out 4-0. We took care of the puck. Like I said, Lankinen has always been great. I know you said this team is built for the playoffs. Obviously, the goaltending tandem's great. We're assuming that Demko, I think, looked pretty good in his return. He didn't look like it was his injury was bothering him or anything, so that was nice to see. I'd still like to see Demko for a little bit more before I'm really, really confident in the goaltending here. But like you said, Lankinen has been fantastic. I think the only thing I could think of to make this team more ready for the playoffs, like you said, I think we got a deep, gritty forward core. I still think we need another defenseman for sure.
No, and that's completely fair enough. I also would like to see them add a defenseman at the trade deadline. And I mean, even in Elliot Friedman's written 32 Thoughts tonight, he said the Canucks actively trying to shop Vincent Desharnais and also looking for replacements. So I've got one final stat about shots on goal for you. And then why don't we move to the third and talk about potential trades that the Canucks could try to make. Okay, my shot on goal stat for you. Now, this is before tonight's game. Heading into tonight's game. The Canucks are 4th last in the league in shots goal for per game. And that's only gone down because heading into tonight's game, 26.7 average shots on goal for. And of course, only managed 19 tonight, so it's gone down. The teams behind them, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Detroit Red Wings. Those are not great teams to be in company of. I'm just going to be honest. And even the teams in front of them, the Blues, Utah, Kraken, the Sharks, the Flyers, the Ducks, none of these are like legitimate playoff contenders. So when you are the only team in the whole bottom 12 that looks that way, I do think it's a little bit of a worry because you can't rely on being able to get 4 goals on 19 shots every single night. Now, I know they've done it several nights in a row now, but it just doesn't feel feasible long term. And ultimately, it wasn't last year's playoffs, so it's hard to believe it will be in this one.
I will say this to counter your stat. They're 4th in terms of shooting percentage with 12%. They're actually 4th. There's only 3 teams ahead of them in terms of shooting percentage. Now, depending on how you look at that, that could be a good or bad thing. Yeah, that could regress. Now you're really looking bad. But they are doing really well in terms of shooting percentage. So they've been opportunistic. But like you said, there's a little bit of worry for sure in terms of, I mean, you need to get more shots on goal. And if you want to win hockey games, you have to shoot the puck. And they haven't been doing that. I saw something in the chat, though, from Sammy. Would you alternate Demko and Lankinen for the remainder of the season? Obviously, in terms of myself being a goalie, I'm going to say that I'd like to see... I think Lankinen's played well enough that it should be split. Like, you shouldn't not see Lankinen. Like, you should only see Lankinen, like, every 5 games or whatever. But I'd like to see Demko... maybe not for the next month, but towards the end of the season, I'd like to see Demko get played a little bit more just to get him into shape, because I don't want him to only play a few games, whatever. I think there's 48 games left or something in the season. I don't want to see him only play like 15 games or whatever come playoff time, and then he has to go for playoffs. We're going to try and get him to go for playoffs, and he's not going to be ready. Now, that being said, maybe he doesn't go for playoffs. Maybe you just ride Lankinen as the starter because he's giving you the numbers. I mean, why would you take him out of the net? He's been elite right now. But I think right now, I think I'd want to see Demko get a little bit more starts just to break off some of that rust. I'd actually have to look at the schedule. I'm not sure. I'll look at the schedule quickly, who they got coming up. But they have Boston, so that's a game. That's a very beatable team in Boston right now. It's not Boston from a couple years ago. Colorado, you don't really want to throw them to the wolves, but then you got guys like Utah. There's a few games in there, I think, that you could ride.
Go on. Look 2 games after that.
The
Senators.
The Senator. Well, I'll say the Senators.
The Adam Gaudette.
Yeah,
that's a bad
I was gonna say they might be. I'm not actually gonna disagree with you on that one. They might be not like best ranked, and they might be underperforming, but this is still a pretty good offense. They can take advantage. They can surprise a goaltender. They can surprise a goaltender. They have good goal scorers over there, even though they haven't been performing to what you'd expect. But I still think I'd like to see Demko more than Lankinen just to get him into game shape. But I think it should be closer to like a 55-45. I think Lankinen's earned that.
Brief goaltending stat for you for the Ottawa Senators. In the past 2 years, the Ottawa Senators are 48-3 in games where they've gotten 900 goaltending.
And that's not even that much. That's not even that much.
8 losses, 3 overtime losses. So even if you combine those two, they're 40-11 in games where they get 900 save percentage. That's like the bare minimum. Come on. So
like the bare
anyways,
minimum.
it's not life is not hell.
Well, maybe you guys just don't play defense. Maybe that's what it is.
I don't know what you're talking about. But to go back to the Lankinen thing, I'm going to agree with you. I think that for at least the next month, maybe a month and a bit, You actually still give Lankinen kind of the harder teams as Demko slowly but surely gets back. This is a huge, unprecedented injury he's coming back from. You don't want to rush him back into the lineup. You don't want to rush him back into
Especially when you don't have to.
But
Lankinen hasn't been. Yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah, but I agree with your point that if you don't have him ready for the playoffs, if you're playing 1 game a week and then you have to go to playing 4 in 10 days, that might, kill you.
Then it depends. And it depends. Do they do some shenanigans like they did in last year's playoffs with their goaltending and say, no, we're going to actually start Lankinen? Who knows? But in terms of what we think, they want Demko to be the starter. You have to get him in game shape for the playoffs.
Honestly, my absolutely insane take is that I think there is a world where the Canucks get rid of Demko and just keep Lankinen as their starter. Because here's my thing with Thatcher Demko is he is now permanently injured, as we know. And this is also, his 3rd or 4th major injury? He had 2 in college.
He's almost 30 as well.
And then, exactly, he's almost 30. He had 2 in college. Then he had 1 smaller one last year. And then obviously the big one, which took him out of commission through the playoffs, over the summer, and into December. You're looking at a 30-year-old goaltender coming off major injuries. Now, I know when he's on his game, there's good argument for the fact that he is the best goaltender in the league. There is good arguments for that. He was 2nd in Vezina voting last year. And you don't just want to pass up a superstar netminder. But if the Canucks feel like Demko can't achieve his peak form of years gone by, there's a chance they take a flyer on Kevin Lankinen, because you can get him signed long-term and not that insane of a deal, considering that while he's playing insane this year, he doesn't have past years to back it up. So this would be the year to try to get him cheap long-term. So it will be interesting to see what they do with Lankinen, with Demko, and with any trades. So let's get into some trade rumor and move us on to the 3rd period. And of course, the 3rd period sponsored by our wonderful merch we've got here for Game Over Vancouver. So let me just bring that up real quick. Send Liam to the wayside. We've got merch. Please consider supporting us by buying our merch. It's super comfortable, I can say, having now gotten to experience some in person. What better way to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? We've got plenty of apparel. We've got mugs. It's coming up to, I was going to say it's coming up to winter. We're in December. It's definitely winter. We've got some sweaters for you. We've got some shirts. Again, they feel great, and they've all been designed in-house by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. So take a look. QR on your screen right now in the bottom right-hand corner to consider supporting us and looking great while doing it as well. And a Christmas update using the code GOHOLIDAYS, that's G-O Holidays. We're offering 15% off on all winter products, the hoodies and the beanie. This is going to be active until Christmas Day with a Boxing Day sale after that. So some really great time to buy some merch right now and support us here in Game Over Vancouver. So let's bring Liam back in and talk about some potential trades. And let's start with the one that we know the Canucks are trying to do, Vincent Desharnais. So it's hard to know where these trades lie, because usually you get a chance of kind of understanding the trade market by viewing trades that have happened over the past year and drawing comparables from that. I have no idea what it's going to cost to get rid of him, because let's look at some comparables.
I was going to say, you're going to have to pay to get rid of him.
Absolutely.
Like, there's no world where that doesn't happen.
Maybe not. Okay, so, and this is why I say let's look into some comparables. Jacob Trouba with one of the most overinflated deals in the league. Not only did the New York Rangers
There's no way you're going to compare Vinny Desharnais and Jacob Trouba.
I am right now. I absolutely am going to compare
Okay. Go. I'll bear with you.
Here's the thing. I will give you that, obviously, goes without saying, Jacob Trouba is a much better defender than Vincent Desharnais.
I'm glad you got that out of the way earlier.
I got to go double check exactly Trouba's contract. But I believe it's $8 million.
It is. I think it might be $8
million. Exactly. $8 million. So Desharnais only makes 2. So it's 1/4 of the contract. Now, can you argue he might be a quarter of the player? Probably. But okay, a quarter of the player, a quarter of the contract, pretty much fair value. Not only did the Rangers not have to pay to get rid of Jacob Trouba's contract, but they got pieces back. Now, I'm not going to say they're huge pieces or anything, but they got some tangible pieces for that contract.
Didn't they get a second in that deal?
No, it was a 4th. And Juho Vakanainen, who was a late first round
I remember
pick
him
a few years ago,
but
hasn't really panned out. He's been an okay depth guy. Yeah. So basically like a 6th or 7th defenseman and a 4th round pick. Say what you will, those are pieces. Those are something. Well, and they didn't have to give up anything. They didn't attach anything. They didn't retain anything. However,
And didn't you see the sick video the Anaheim Ducks made? You can't come across their blue line
that was
anymore.
pretty cool. I mean, then the Senators kind of did go across the blue
Yeah,
line and score
that's
5
why the
times. But anyways, then, however, you look at other contracts around the league. Now, Steve Yzerman, who starting to look like the worst general manager in all of hockey after building a perennial contender.
Whoa. You're just throwing things around like that,
Okay. I'll let you respond to that in 1 second after I point this out, and then maybe
yeah, you
you'll
got
agree with me.
so many things you've just said that you gotta let me cut. Like, gotta let me get in here.
Jake Wollman, who only makes $4.5 million
good.
and has been amazing this year as the number 1 D in San Jose.
Did you really
Cost
think?
a
Did you really
second-round
hold
pick
on?
to get rid of?
But did you really think that a guy, an old school hockey player like Steve Yzerman, was gonna let Jake Wallman do the gritty on his
But you're
hockey
not
team all
paying
day
a
long?
second-round pick to get rid of a guy because he grittied after scoring the OT goal. They got rid of him because they didn't think he was good. But again, they had to attach a second-round pick, which is a significant draft pick, to get rid of a guy who is living up to his contract. So
he's been nearly point per game on a terrible Sharks team.
And so, okay, you can rebuttal to anything that I just went on after a long classic Zach Clarke rant. But I think it's really hard to understand what the value of a defenseman's contract is when you have the Wallman move and the Trouba move made in the same year.
No, that's fair. I'll try and unpack all the things you just said. I'll start with what you just said about Yzerman. I don't think he's even close to the worst GM in the league. You got guys like Boston right now who have looked like a dumpster fire. There's just
I might actually have to give you that one. He's
close. The Buffalo Sabres.
Same boat. Yeah. I want you to point out to me where the Red Wings are better than the Sabres.
Okay, hold on. But let me say this. Yes, as of late, Yzerman has not been good. For sure. Like JT Compher.
He's been there for 7 years.
Yes, 7 years. You're right. But
I know
he also made a dynasty in the Tampa Bay Lightning. That doesn't go for nothing.
No, absolutely.
That doesn't get said for nothing. Obviously, the last few years, almost decade, he hasn't been very good. But it's Steve Yzerman. I have no problem.
I think he'll dynasty. But are you kidding me? 7 years, and
it's been a while.
Is the Red Wings.
And they look
11,
terrible.
14, and 4.
Yeah, they don't look good at all.
They have a goal
this year.
differential of -18. They're losing games to everyone.
Yeah, and you know the bad thing, the worst part is all the players they brought in that obviously Steve Yzerman had to bring in have not done well. Patrick Kane hasn't looked good. JT Compher hasn't been living up. JT Compher hasn't looked good. Andrew Kopp hasn't looked good.
That defense core is. Are you kidding me? 7 years as a general manager, and that's the defense.
They could use a Jake Wallman right now.
Jake Wallman would be their best defenseman behind Seider. It'd be their second best guy, and he attached a second to get him out. No, honestly, I stand by my pick that Steve Yzerman is at the very least a bottom 3 GM in the league, at least as of what he's done. 7 years.
Yeah. Has he been bad lately? Yes.
Again, 7 years is not lately.
7 years is a long time, yes. But I will say this. I have faith in him to bring it back. Maybe it will be with a different team. It could be with a different team. I don't know. But I have faith in him to still be a world-class GM. We've seen him do it before. I think he can do it again. What you said before, trying to remember all the ridiculous things you just said in the last minute. I shouldn't even say they're ridiculous. Some of them I do agree with. I just had to talk about them. What was the other thing about Demko you just brought up? Oh, moving Demko. Getting off Demko. I actually don't think that's as hot of a take as you think. I don't think they're going to move Demko, nor do I think they should, at least not yet. But he has been made of glass, and if you're going to rely on your goaltender, especially in the playoffs, you need him to be healthy, and he hasn't been able to be healthy for a while now. And they always say, I mean, maybe this is more of a football term, but the best ability is availability, and he hasn't been available. So it's tough to say, but like you said, his peak is he is a top 3 goalie in the NHL. That's a real hard thing to just let walk, or even move and to see what you get back. Because if you move Demko, I mean, there's only 2 goalies, 3 goalies in the NHL who are better than him that you could get back in their prime.
No, and I'll say this: we've already seen that goaltender value in trades is just nothing. I mean, Linus Ullmark would probably have the same, honestly, arguably more value than Thatcher Demko did when he got traded, and he got traded for A pile
Bag
of
of pucks.
peanuts. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
bag of
seriously,
pucks.
basically nothing. So moving
And
that
he's a
Demko,
Vesna winner, a
yeah,
Vesna winning goalie. Yeah, no goal. And I think it's just the nature of the position. Obviously, me being a former goaltender, it's hard to like. I don't want to like slag on the goaltending in the NHL because obviously they're all really good goaltenders. But man, the consistency issues that a lot of these teams have, I don't know what it is. I don't know if goalie gear is getting smaller. I think the biggest thing for me is players in the NHL are just getting so good. They're getting so good at scoring goals that you're seeing more goals go in the back of the net.
yeah.
But yeah, there's been a lot of consistency issues with goalies. Now, maybe that's also me as a Canadian goalie. I obviously follow a lot of the Canadian goalies. And well, the Canadian goaltending has not been very good for the last long time. It's been a while
Yeah,
since the
it's
Canadian goalies
been a
have been
while.
the best ones. But yeah, it's definitely a tough one right there.
So, okay, let's get back to Desharnais, where this all originated before my comparisons to Trouba and Wallman threw this whole conversation out of whack. Let's get
Right, hold on,
back to
I
Desharnais.
forgot. Hold on, no, I gotta say the Jacob Trouba thing for that deal. I do agree that it's hard to say where they are. I do like you saying that Desharnais is a quarter of the contract for a quarter of the player. I think that's a really good analogy. But I don't know. It's $8 million for Jacob Trouba is a lot. It's a lot of money, but at least he brings something. Desharnais right now doesn't score, doesn't play
He's a
defense,
negative
doesn't bring
asset.
anything.
Yeah.
Whereas at least Jacob Trouba, at least like tonight when Susie got knocked down, at least Jacob Trouba is dropping the gloves there. Like
Yeah.
Jacob Trouba is bringing something. Whereas, yeah, like you said, Desharnais is a net negative on all areas of the ice right now.
So we'll stay on the Desharnais trade. I see your comment, Alfred Cliffhanger Canuck. That's a great question. We'll get to that after this Desharnais thing. But Desharnais, moving his contract is going to be tough. Now, he doesn't make that much money, but you are going to have to attach pieces on. And then the question becomes, if the Canucks want to upgrade their defense, well, you're probably sending Desharnais away in that trade, which would raise the cost of whatever player you're bringing in so much more. And it's like, do you really want to have to give up a first-round pick for the likes of someone like Marcus Pettersson just to not only bring in the defender, but also get Desharnais' contract off the books? It's tough. He just hasn't been good enough. But from the reports that we're hearing from Friedman and Dollywall and all that, the Canucks are aggressively trying to move Desharnais. So I don't expect him to last to this trade deadline. I think that we can safely say that this is a failed experiment. And honestly, probably the worst signing of this new regime's career. But I will say that's a good thing. Because if a $2 million, if a 2x2 contract is the worst contract you've signed, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. You're talking to a guy who's watched the Kings sign PLD. I mean,
or even the old regime where we signed Branson 4x4.
Or
I mean,
Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who we're still paying.
Yeah, and we will be for quite a while. I'm going to be almost 30 by the time we're done paying him.
Yeah, so I will admit, in terms of like, no one's perfect, no regime is perfect, and the fact that this is the biggest mistake, I think, is really good.
No, absolutely. So it is an interesting question of where we're going to send Desharnais and how much it'll cost
to
move him.
You know what I think about it? I want to see the Canucks go after one of the two guys in Calgary. Now, will Vinny Desharnais be a part of that deal? I don't know. But I want the Canucks to go after one of the two guys in Calgary because I think they move the needle the most. We talked about it before with our buddy Lachlan about how we want to see the Canucks bring in one defenseman who can play, not two seventh-pair defensemen. We want them to bring in one guy who we know is a solid defenseman. And I think the best two options on the market right now that are realistic to move are the two guys in Calgary.
No, honestly, that's completely fair enough. I couldn't agree more that the Canucks really do need to bring in a guy that makes a difference. If they bring in another 6th or 7th defenseman, we have so many of those. So I would like to see a guy that can, maybe not necessarily run his own pairing, but doesn't need help on his own pairing. So
think about if you looked at it like this. Say, hypothetically, we bring in Rasmus Andersson, my favorite one. That's the one I want to bring in. Your top pair is Quinn Hughes and Hronek. And then I believe Rasmus Andersson, is he a right defenseman? I think they actually
he is a right defenseman, although he has experience playing both sides.
He does play both, but he's a right defenseman. So you're playing. So your second pairing is Susie Anderson. That already looks much better. Myers gets, in my opinion, Myers should be the one sent down to the third pairing. And then you have a guy like Brandstrom, Forbert, whoever you want to plug in as that last defenseman. That is a much, much, much better defensive core than what we currently have.
It is. I just don't see a world where the Canucks are going to be able to get a defenseman of that caliber. That's why I do kind of look to the likes of like Marcus Pettersson or Will Borgen or just someone that is a second line defenseman. Because Rasmus Andersson, I said this last show, I'll say it again, is going to cost so much more than people think. I would be gobsmacked to see him going for anything less than the package that we sent for Elias Lindholm last season. And as he has a better contract than Lindholm did at that time, and another year after this, it's going to be even more so. And I just don't think the Canucks can afford to give up another
and if you're trying to
roster player, first-round pick, and 3 prospects.
And if you're trying to unload Desharnais, you're probably giving up more as well.
Even more. So do you really want to give up someone like Jonathan Lekkerimäki? I mean, it's a tough
Do you think Uyghur's the easier one to get from them then?
No, because he signed long term. I was
gonna say he's even harder.
I think, and that's why I almost think that you do look somewhere else, because as ideal as those situations are, it's just all about kind of cost to value, and I just don't see either one of those players providing the value that would make up for such a high cost.
What do we know? Obviously, who cares what we think? But Marcus Pettersson, to me, he's another 7th, 6th defenseman, another third pairing defenseman guy. Like, sure, he's a second defenseman, but like technically he's a second defenseman, but I don't know. He doesn't move the needle enough for me.
I don't know. He's been a pretty consistent second liner on Pittsburgh. And I mean, no, he's not as shiny as someone like Rasmus Andersson or anything like that, but I do think
maybe he's just not as shiny. Maybe you're right. Maybe he's just not as shiny.
I mean, if you look at his seasons, he's really consistently around a 30-point defenseman, especially if you look at like points per game. Since 22-23, so like the last 2 seasons and currently this season, he's on pace to put up at least 30 points from your back end while being really solid defensively. And I think that 30 points from your back end, like last year, think about how bad the Penguins were last year. He was plus 28 while putting up 30 points, playing all 82 games, didn't miss a game. And getting that kind of reliability from your back end, only 28, he's a player that I really like. Plus, of course, about how connected Vancouver is to Pittsburgh.
I'll say this, the Penguins might be bad, but Malkin and Crosby are not. So... But I will say 30. That's is
what
nice.
We should trade for Sidney Crosby. That would be cool.
Yeah. So it is. I don't know. Like I'm not saying that his points are inflated because he plays with those guys. Because like you said, Pittsburgh is not very good. Maybe it is the fact that Rasmus Andersson is just a little more shiny and he just is a little bit more of the blockbuster trade, if you will. But I don't know. Pettersson just doesn't do enough for me. But like you said, in terms of what the Canucks need, maybe he's a little bit more serviceable, and obviously his contract is way better.
I mean, it is tough just looking at the standings of who might actually be available for trading, because if you look at the teams that are kind of comfortably missing playoff spots, there's actually very little to go around. I mean, from the Pacific Division, realistically, the ones that are going to miss, Flames, Kraken, Sharks, and Ducks. Kraken, maybe Will Borgen, but I mean, if you don't like Marcus Pettersson, you're not going to like Will Borgen, because I think he's...
My thing is, all of these teams, and you're going to have to pay, like, if you want to go higher on the depth chart, let's say for the Kraken, I mean, a guy like Brandon Montour, it's another guy who's going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah, well, they're not giving up Brandon Montour. I mean, let's get some realism in here.
Yeah, I just mean, you know what I mean? Like, all of these teams, like, all of these teams, like, you're not getting their defensemen right now.
I almost wonder if, and you can call me crazy, Ian Cole from the Utah Yeti, from the Utah Hockey Club.
He obviously didn't have the best finish with Vancouver, but I liked him, especially during the playoff run. What about a guy like, I don't actually know, I got to look how old he is, but what about, he's 22, so I don't know how much he's actually going to cost, but Riker Evans, he's been really good for Seattle.
I'd just be so shocked if a team that's out of a playoff spot is going to give up a 22-year-old that's been good. I just don't think he's...
Yeah, he's 22.
But, okay, real quick, I'll let you think of some more...
let me find some...
While you find them, let's go to Elfrin's question, which is, which teams would you see take on Demko's contract if the Canucks were to trade him, and if the Canucks sign Lankinen, would he get starters money? So firstly, Lankinen needs a new deal after this year. So the Canucks this season have to either make the decision to sign him, which is going to cost starters money after a year like this year, or let him go. And that decision right there thus spells the Demko decision. If they let Lankinen walk, they are hanging on to Thatcher Demko. Because they will not be able to... Like, you just can't find a diamond in the rough like Kevin Lankinen every year. Even Casey DeSmith last year, I would say, played up to, maybe even beyond expectations for a backup goaltender. Now, Kevin Lankinen playing even better, so obviously it doesn't look as good, but My point being is I don't think the Canucks can continue this life cycle of signing a goaltender in the offseason right before training camp for $1 million and just randomly having them become amazing. I just don't see that as for kind of doable over a long period of time. Now, Thatcher Demko is just a big question of how good he can continue to be. If he shows throughout the rest of this year and through the playoffs that the injury isn't bugging him that much, then I say keep Demko and whatever with Lankinen. Sign him if you have the money. If you don't, whatever. If he shows that he has some wear and tear from those injuries, then honestly, I'd love to sign Lankinen. How much do I think Lankinen will make? Tough question. I think he'll make less than Demko makes right now. Demko makes $5 million. Now, the reason I think Lankinen will make less is that this is his first year doing this. Obviously, he's been very good as a backup last year in Nashville. And I said the moment we signed him, I thought it was one of the most underrated signings of the offseason. Nice to be proven right for a change. That's not a feeling I'm used to. But he was 16th in goals saved above expected last year. 16th of every goalie in the league. That right there is a starting goaltender. And then he's been better this year. Despite that,
no, it was a hit.
I think that he'll probably get in the realm of, I'd love to hear your opinion, $4 to $4.5 million would be my guess for Lankinen over a course of probably 3 or 4 years. From not just from any team.
I've always liked Kevin Lankinen. I think you're right, bang on with the terms of the amount of money, just because, like you said, he hasn't proven that he can do it for a full season yet or a full couple seasons yet. But I think he could demand anywhere between $3 and $4.5 million from any team, and I don't see why they wouldn't give it to him. I think he's definitely earned that money, if not maybe more money. I'm trying to look to see what teams would take Demko's contract, because obviously I'm on team. I want to keep Demko, see how this goes. Obviously, now it does depend on stuff that the fans aren't going to know. There's going to be stuff in the building, like maybe like you said, the wear and tears. Maybe it is affecting him and we just don't know it. We're obviously not in the building with the players. We don't know. But I'm on team keep Demko for now, see how it goes. But ideally, you'd like to be able to keep both of them. I'm trying to think of a team that you could even unload him to and who would want him.
Well, so that's the thing, is that obviously he's signed till the end of next year. So at the end of next year, he's going to be 31, going on 32, injury-prone goaltender who at his best can be one of the best goaltenders in the league. So you need to look at a team that is trying to win now, and by now, of course, I mean next year at the end of that. So you just basically have to look for teams that don't necessarily have that starting goaltender. I'm going to throw a couple ones out here. My most insane one, I don't think this makes sense, but in some world it might, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
That's not a bad idea. Obviously, if Colorado didn't do what they just did a couple of weeks ago and trade for a whole new goaltending core, I would have said Colorado's up there as well.
But again, you have to think about this is going to be the end of next year. So you have to think about teams that are still going to be trying to compete then and that won't have solved their goaltending situation. My thing with Toronto is that right now they're really banking on Wall breaking through as a starting goaltender. And if he doesn't do that, then they're going to be in that situation this time next year. And I mean, I
think Stolarz has been very similar to Kevin Lankinen, though. He's been unreal.
He's been unreal.
He came in there. He's been given the starting job when Wool was out for a while there, and he took it and ran.
Be a starter for years to come.
And that's the same thing with the Canucks, though. Do you trust Kevin Lankinen to be a starter for years to come?
That's fair.
You know what I mean? And so I don't dislike the idea of Toronto taking a guy like Thatcher Demko. I just don't think it would ever happen because I don't think Toronto's ever going to change their goaltending core, no matter what happens.
Now, Darcy Higgs putting an interesting one in the chat. Would Edmonton take Demko? Honestly,
I like that one as well.
I don't mind that one. Now, the one rebuttal that I would have to that is that would the Canucks be willing to trade him in division? Now, of course, he is a UFA, so if he fully walks, then you don't need to trade him. He can go wherever he wants, and he might sign with Edmonton. That does make a lot of sense. But if they try to trade him at the deadline, they wouldn't give him to a division rival. But honestly, in terms of making sense, absolutely. I mean, they're going to keep the Stuart Skinner experiment going for a while, but if he still doesn't work by the end of next year, Demko is the exact kind of the guy they're going to jump all over. As McDavid and Draisaitl slowly start to decline, you're going to need elite goaltending for the final years of their prime. I actually think
they want to win.
Makes a lot of sense.
And those two guys want to win. McDavid and Draisaitl, I mean, maybe they retire as Oilers, but if this team keeps losing and not winning Stanley Cups, I mean, obviously they made it to the final last year, which was nice for them, but I mean, how long are they going to take losing? And especially when like the issues are so glaring and we're just not solving them. Yeah, we're just not solving that.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that can only be so frustrating. But like you said, division rival. I don't know how realistic that would be. I think it's a perfect fit. Other than that, but yeah, division rival is really hard to trade an elite goaltender to, especially if it bounces back on you. If it works against you, that's going to be pretty bad for the regime.
Yeah.
I'm trying to just look at other teams. Most of the other teams, other than Colorado, Edmonton, Toronto, most of the other teams that are sitting in playoff spots right now, I don't see them wanting.
I've got another one. This is the one that I thought made the most sense before, is because, again, you're not looking at teams in playoff spots right now. You're thinking about in 2 years' time. Columbus Blue Jackets.
Okay.
Seriously.
You think they're a playoff team in 2 years?
I think they're trying to be. I mean, they've been trying to be a playoff team for ages now. And I mean, honestly, like, obviously, the loss of the Gaudreaus just so tragic. I always have them on our hearts, but that really set them back a lot. But I think that they are continuing to try and be that. I mean, you're going to have Adam Fantilli with 3 years of experience by that point in time. So I think that that's a team that could make sense since they don't really have any answers in net right now. Merzlikins, he's not going to win you a cup. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's super inconsistent. I'm just trying to think. I mean, obviously, I would have said the Senators last year if they didn't bring in Allmark. Yeah, they got Allmark now for 4 years. Other teams that are going to be trying to win in the next couple.
I don't think are going to be good enough by the end of next year, but if somehow they take massive leaps forward, that could make sense. But honestly, then that's it.
What I mean, like,
and then the Kraken, but that's another divisional one.
And I'll say this for the Kraken, I really like Joey Daccord.
No,
I think nice. Joey Daccord is super, is super solid.
As necessarily dead cert for in terms of being the goalie of the future. As if you look below them, the Sharks and the Ducks. I mean, Dostal and Askarov, I think are just like dead cert.
Those are your goalies of the future.
Yeah, whether
those are your goalies of the future.
At least some
and also. But I'll say this for Anaheim and San Jose, they're for sure not going to be playoff teams next year. I'll put my hat on that one if they are. I don't know, maybe me and you can think of a bet I have to do. But San Jose, San Jose and Anaheim, I don't think are playoff teams next year.
They could be. The Ducks,
maybe,
but like the Sharks,
maybe.
should be dead last in the league, and they're actually like respectable.
But the
Sharks are 6 points back of the Canucks.
I also don't think Askarov is ready next year to be a starter.
Oh, I couldn't disagree with you more. You know what? I'll agree. I'll agree with you. I don't think he's ready next year to be a starter because I think he's ready this year to be a starter. I mean, seriously, what more does he have to prove in the AHL? What do you think his AHL numbers are right now?
No, they're out of this world. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know he's been fantastic.
So I mean, I'll just say them. And he might be. This is through 12 games, and he has a 946. How is he not ready for the NHL? You know what I mean?
I think he's ready for the NHL, but for a starting job in the NHL, that's a big leap, especially for someone.
Dustin Wolf, how can you possibly prove yourself more? Dustin Wolf,
I think he should be getting
the AHL, and now he's a starter. 100%. And he looks legit. Askarov.
And 100%, I agree. I think they are the same, but I will say to you, do you think Calgary's a playoff team next year?
No, but again, if we're talking about starting goaltenders in the future, Dustin Wolf's a cert for Calgary. Askarov is too. And much like Dustin Wolf had to have 2 amazing seasons in the AHL before being a starter, Askarov already has 2 amazing seasons in the AHL.
I don't think Askarov can be the starter for a team that's trying to win the Stanley Cup next year.
Well, the Sharks aren't necessarily trying to win the Cup next year. I think we lost
go to the playoffs.
Discussion. I just that like they could be a playoff team next year.
I don't know. Maybe. Celebrini is that good. He is so good. He is really good. I'll give you that. But that's a big if. The San Jose Sharks make
chat. What would we get back for Demko? I'm sorry, I don't want to break your hearts. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Literally nothing.
The goalie market right now is.
You will get maybe a bag of potato chips.
I was gonna say, like, if you had asked me a couple years ago, I would have been like, "Oh my God, we're gonna get an arm and a leg." But I would have said that for Linus Ullmark too.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The best comparable, because it's the only time it's happened recently, in terms of trading a legitimate starting goaltender who is very good, is Linus Ullmark. So let's look at the Linus Ullmark trade. Firstly, coming off of a Vezina season, 1 season removed from the trade.
Yeah, it's literally right after.
And secondly, doesn't have all the health issues that Demko does. So already, just objectively a better kind of
I think it's just better. It's just a better piece. And let's look
at what Boston got back for them. The worst starting goaltender in the entire NHL in Joonas Korpisalo. Now, I know he's bounced back, but we're looking at just trade value. The
that's
worst
your Senators hate
in
there.
the league in Jonas Korpisalo
Especially
on
at
a
the
bad
time.
contract.
Especially at the time, he was
Then they
brutal
got
for the
back
Senators.
a player who is in the AHL, an AHL enforcer, and then the 25th overall pick. So Demko, who has even less value than that, I mean, seriously, we're looking at like a second-round pick.
No, the goalie market's just hasn't been
Yeah,
a very
it's the goalie
lucrative market. I would even say Mackenzie Blackwood probably should have got more than he was traded for.
Yeah,
Me
I
and
mean,
you
he got
both like,
a fourth-round pick and a bottom 6 player.
and he's a 27-year-old who in a couple of years might be a very good starter. He's a starter right now. He might be a very good starter. Yeah, I think the goalie market right now is just not a very lucrative place.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. They got a second-round pick for Blackwood. But then, of course, you
imagine
have to factor in the fact that they took on all of Georgiev's contract.
I was gonna say, and like for example,
value going the other way.
Think about what winning the Vezina a season ago means. That's the best goalie in the NHL. That's like if someone won the Rocket a 1 year removed, and they were like, well, we'll give you a second or a third for him.
Yeah.
Like that just wouldn't. The goalie market just isn't a very lucrative place right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I agree with that. Unfortunately, I don't think you'd get much for Demko. So, keep putting your questions in the chat as we'll get to the.
I will say,
we'll answer some final questions. 1 second. We'll start to wind up the stream here. So if you have any final questions for us, it could be anything Canucks related, anything NHL related. It doesn't have to be Canucks. Let us know and we'll answer them before we go. Before we go.
I was gonna say we've already been going for an hour and 25. I haven't even noticed the time. I will say I think you might be able to somehow get a little more than Allmark just because I don't know. I feel like the Canucks are better at making deals than the Senators. Sorry, Zach.
You're right.
But not much better. It's not like you're not getting a first for Demko.
No, you just wouldn't get a first for Demko. So that it's unrealistic to think so. Even as good as he is, it's not.
It's just the goalie market's just not a lucrative place. I think it's the nature of the position where it's so volatile. Like 1 year, I mean, the perfect example I always love to talk about him. I know you do too. Andrew Hamburglar. I mean, you got goaltending. Sometimes you have guys come in here and they're like, oh my god, this guy's going to be the next best thing, and then they just fall off the face of a cliff. I mean, look, I was talked about Sergei Bobrovsky. The goalie market's just not a lucrative place. You just won the Stanley Cup, and even a year before that, his regular season was average at best, and then he goes to the playoffs and he's the best goalie in the NHL.
Yeah,
like it's the nature of the position. It's so up and down that it's really hard to commit. That's why I was so surprised by the deal that the Rangers gave Shesterkin. Not to get off topic, but like it's just such a big deal for a position that it's very volatile right now.
It is very volatile, and honestly, that's why I'm not surprised about the Shesterkin deal. Because if you think it's that volatile, get your guy locked up right now, kind of thing. So
that's fair. I'll give you that.
On to the fourth period, and before we answer any questions, just any final thoughts about tonight's game. Overall,
there was a hockey game.
Yeah, there was a hockey game. I think the Canucks. This was a game they really needed. Some serious struggles at home. Consistent struggles at home too. They're now 4-6-4 at home, which is still not good. But tonight shows that they can do it, and it shows that the Canucks can hit that level of hockey. Now, the name of the game is consistency. They need to get back to the point where they can put on this kind of performance every single night. But for a hockey market for the past 2 months has been saying, hey, what is the ceiling of this Canucks team? Is the ceiling high enough to actually win a cup? I think tonight's game shows you that the ceiling is high enough that this Canucks team can win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I think tonight was a really good test for the Canucks, and I couldn't have said it better myself. I completely agree. This is a team that won the Stanley Cup. I mean, Florida's been in contention for the Cup for 3 or 4 years now, if not longer. Even when they had Jonathan Huberdeau a few years ago. I mean, they've been a top team in the NHL for a while. It was really nice to see Vancouver get it done. And obviously, JT Miller back in the lineup, that was a huge plus. But if you're looking at it in terms of with a full healthy roster, technically you still beat the Florida Panthers with your backup goalie. So
yeah.
It was really nice to see. And you also beat the Florida Panthers when Pettersson was still invisible. You had a lot of guys who still weren't showing up tonight. You have obviously no Hronek. I mean, it was a very encouraging win. I liked that we didn't give up the puck a lot. We were taking care of the puck, which was really nice. Quinn Hughes did Quinn Hughes things. Lankinen played a really good game. Obviously, we were outshot again. I'd say that's my biggest negative for the night was got to find a way to
20 shots again.
Yeah, got to find a way to get more pucks on net. I thought the rush looked really good. I don't know why we're not hitting the shots on goal. I don't know if it's a bit of the Sedin syndrome where we just are trying to pass it into the net, not pulling the trigger enough. But I thought we looked good entering the zone on the rush. Like we were generating a bit of offense off of the rush. But once the rush slowed down and we had to set up and get the cycle going, I thought the offense slowed down a little bit. And that's when we weren't getting shots through and stuff. But other than that, I'd say if I had to give it a scale out of 10, it's a 7 or an 8, maybe even a 9 for the Canucks tonight.
Honestly, that's a completely fair enough rating. I think that while there is some things to be worried about, ultimately, if a 4-0 win against the defending Stanley Cup champions, that's what you need to take away from tonight's game. Great job by the Canucks. So now let's get to some final questions before we dip here. And
I'm excited for this
one from Sammy
I'm
Baines.
excited for this
right
one.
away, a spicy one from Sammy Baines. Sammy Baines throwing the fire on the grill. Let's get to cooking. Montreal lost 9-2 to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Sammy Baines' question is, after tonight's 9-2 loss, should Montreal fire their head coach, Martin St. Louis? Liam, I'll let you get first crack at that one.
Oh, man, I've been watching Montreal a lot this year just because I have Suzuki, Slavkovsky, and Lane Hudson on my fantasy team. So I've been watching a lot of Montreal this year. And I don't know, it's so hard for me to say. Because on one hand, 9-2 against Pittsburgh, who is also kind of a dumpster fire right now, is that's a tough look. But I will also say Montreal knew this year that they weren't coming into this year looking to win the Stanley Cup, to say the least. So, but he's had a leash for a while now. It's not like this is the first year of the rebuild. You know what I mean? So it depends on how much longer you want to take to give guys like Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Lane Hudson now. I mean, there's a lot of young talent that I think that can develop into really great pieces. It's just, can they do that under Martin St. Louis? If I had to give the answer, I would say no. To not be vague about it, to not ride the fence, I will say no. I think they should give St. Louis to at least the end of the year, maybe even a bit into next year. I think St. Louis, and he's Martin St. Louis. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. He's a beauty. Love Martin St. Louis. I think you give him a little bit longer.
As much as I want to disagree with you because it makes the show more exciting, that's exactly what I was going to say, is I think you have to let him finish the year. Montreal just doesn't have a good enough roster to be firing your coach. Because if you're firing your coach, what you're saying is this team should be winning,
and we're not.
The problem. No, look at their roster. I'm sorry, they will be good in a few years if all their prospects pan out, but they're not good right now. And I'm sorry, but that team they shouldn't be contending. They should be trying to stock up still.
I will admit, I was going to say, there's been some questionable decisions in terms of like taking Slavkovsky off the first line. Like I said, I've watched basically every single Montreal Canadiens game, and I don't necessarily think Slavkovsky has looked terrible. I thought he's looked okay, if not good, in a lot of games. Obviously, the points haven't been there like they were last year. At least the goals, he's actually been doing decently in terms of putting up assists. But I think splitting up the Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky line was really, really I was really surprised by that. But like you said, this isn't a team that came in expecting to win and now they're losing. This is a team that's expecting to lose and they're losing. So you can't fire the coach right now.
No, I think that you do exactly what you suggested, which is given the rest of the year, and then next year, when expectations are a little bit higher, you want to see a step forward. If you don't see noticeable progress by November, December of next year, cut him loose. I think the last thing that I'll say in defense of keeping him is that this is a team that is being built around some tiny forwards. So what better player to learn from than Martin St. Louis, possibly the most exceptional tiny forward to have ever played the game. I mean, he was, 5'9"? Think about a 5'9" superstar. There's very few hockey players that come to mind. So I think if you're going to teach a guy like Nick Suzuki, if you're going to teach a guy like Cole Caulfield how to be a legit superstar, Martin St. Louis could be one of the best guys to do it. So I think you have to give him the leash till the end of the year and into next year a little bit. But you're right that for a coach that this time last year was a dead lock for his team, the seat is starting to warm up for Martin St. Louis.
I think it's definitely starting to get warm, but like I said, I don't think this is a team that's panicking yet. They're kind of being exactly what we thought. They're winning some games, but the majority they're losing. We didn't expect them to be good. They're not good. Not really. You know what I will say, though? They've had some bright spots that I've been really encouraged by. I think Sam Montembeault has been great. So that's really nice to see some Canadian goaltending as well. And I know I've seen all the memes about the head fake master and all that, but I think Lane Hudson's been really good as well. So there's definitely some bright spots for the Canadians, but and like you said, the seat's getting warm, but I think he's still safe for now. And you also bring up a good point. You got small goal scorers like Caulfield, like Suzuki. These are small, pure offensive goal scorers like Martin St. Louis. Who better to develop guys like that?
Yeah, so I think that they'll hang on to him for a little bit. Darcy Higgs naming some good small players. Yeah, Theo Fleury,
Right.
Cliff Ronning. But I will say, then you are talking about guys that aren't necessarily in the modern game of hockey, whether Martin St. Louis, at least in the past 20 years, I couldn't name you a better one. I'll give you the all-time, I would probably have the career of Theo Fleury over St. Louis. Although I'd take St. Louis' career over Cliff Ronning.
Yeah, Theo Fleury would go out there and be like, "What do you mean you're not having a pack of darts between the periods?"
Yeah, well, let's not get into his politics off the ice, but if we're talking about players, yeah, Theo Fleury, only 5'6", very talented player. So, anyways, I think we're good to end there. No more questions in the chats. We'll bid you adieu after we said before coming on air, Liam and I were like, oh, we'll have a nice short show, not a whole lot to talk about.
Happens every time.
Nearly at 100 minutes here. So we shall bid you adieu. Been a very lively chat tonight, so I really do want to extend a thank you to everyone who stopped by, left a comment, anyone who liked and subscribed to the show. It really helps us out, whether you just watch, whether you give us a like or a subscribe. It genuinely helps us out so much, so thank you for all your interaction and joining us on the show today. Of course, Canucks schedule, next game they play will be Saturday against the Boston Bruins. Take down our hated rivals. Against Lindholm and Zadorov, of course, both ex-Canucks. Although Lindholm might be out for that one, as he left tonight's game for the Bruins with an upper body injury. He didn't come back to the game, so who knows if he'll be back in time. But that post-game show should be a lot of fun. So stick around as it'll be covered here on the network. So have a most wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for stopping by, and have a great night.